This is our girl, Catherine, and shockingly, at just 10 years old in elementary school, she could solve the most difficult math problems. The principal then called Catherine's parents and informed them that she had received a scholarship to go straight to the second grade of junior high school. Not only that, but she was also admitted to the best black junior high school in 1926. Racism in America was still very severe. All public facilities were distinguished by the color of their skin, such as toilets, hospitals, schools, and even wash basins where black and white people washed their hands were separated. The principal and teachers were very proud of Catherine's intelligence, and they believed that when she grew up, she would be a great person and prove that black people deserve equal treatment and facilities. 35 years later, Catherine is now an adult. That afternoon, her car broke down while she was driving to her office at NASA or the United States Space Agency with two of her friends, Dorothy and Mary, as accountants. In the midst of confusion, suddenly, the police arrived at the spot. Back in those days, black people were highly doubted. They were even forbidden to stop on the road carelessly. If any black people were seen stopping, they would be arrested. Mary then informed the police that the three of them worked at NASA and that if they were late, the American rocket could fail to fly. Hearing this explanation, the police were then willing to help them. Meanwhile, at the NASA office, government staff watched the news about Russia's imminent rocket launch. This news then irritated the presidential envoy, so he demanded that the head of NASA, Harrison, quickly make a rocket to compete with Russia. They went straight to work as soon as they reached the office. While they were distributing assignments, their boss, Michelle, suddenly came and ordered Catherine to move to the Space Research Division. After Michelle leaves, Dorothy rushes after her to urge them for a promotion to become the room supervisor, given that she had worked as a room supervisor for many years. However, her salary was still calculated like a regular staff and never increased a penny. However, Michelle arrogantly thought that Dorothy was against it and threatened to fire her if she continued to demand a promotion. This left Dorothy very disappointed and heartbroken. On the other hand, Mary's superiors in the rocket assembly division were confused why his homemade rockets always failed to withstand the heat of the Earth's atmosphere. Mary then tried to explain in detail the source of the problem with the rocket. Hearing the analysis, her boss was so amazed that he said he would promote Mary to become a rocket assembly technician. Her boss didn't care about Mary's gender or skin color. He only needed experts to win the competition against Russia in such an emergency. Meanwhile, Catherine has just transferred to the Space Research Division, where she was even mistaken for a cleaning service. When she met Harrison, without further ado, he immediately asked whether Catherine could solve the rocket launch coordinate data formula. She confidently replied that she would be able to solve it in a matter of hours. Seeing that confidence, he tested Catherine to check the report of one of the accounting staff named Paul. While working, she suddenly wanted to pee, but there were no black toilets in that division of the building. So, she had to run to the former division building, which was 800 meters away. After that, she came back and continued to work. While working in the new division, everyone always looked at her with a cynical look. After her job, she still has 3 daughters to look after since her husband and father died. Essie became the breadwinner of the family alone. Fortunately, she still has her mother, who helps her daily to look after the children at home. On Sunday morning, after worship, Dorothy and Mary tried to match Catherine with a soldier named Jim. Even though Catherine refused, she was left alone on a walk with Jim. In between the conversation, he said that he did not expect NASA to accept black female employees. That sentence offended Catherine, and they held back annoyance. She replied that NASA accepted that she was the first black student to receive a scholarship to the best white university in Virginia. So, now Jim can imagine how smart she is, and then he falls silent in his heart. He asked why she was angry. The next day at the office, she saw a small coffee pot specifically for blacks when she wanted to get coffee. For the time being, she calmed her heart and patiently returned to work. Not long after Paul came to give the formula file, when she examined the file, she got confused, seeing multiple scribbles as if he was deliberately trying to bully her. So, she couldn't finish the formula, but she wasn't out of her mind. As he used the light of the lamp to read the scribbles, it turns out that the data in the file is the same as the data on the whiteboard because it's not obvious. Essie then chose to work directly on the blackboard when she went to the toilet. Harrison, Paul, and the entire research team were confused by Catherine's count. They had worked hard to complete the formula, but in just a matter of minutes, she managed to finish it herself. Catherine was being interrogated in Harrison's room by several employees. Paul asked how the formula could be solved even after he had crossed out a lot of data. She then explained how she did it in detail. After hearing that, Harrison reprimanded Paul and told him that from now on, he had to provide as much data as possible so that this project could be completed quickly. When they were resting, Michelle came over to them and asked if it was true that Mary wanted to be promoted to rocket assembly technician. She also stated that Mary's application must be rejected because she has not fulfilled one of the main requirements, namely that Mary is not a white graduate of the university. No matter how high your knowledge is, if you don't graduate from a white university, you will never be a technician at NASA. Although hurt, she was silent without being able to do anything. A few days later, at noon, Dorothy was seen taking her children to the city library, but while she was choosing a book, she was reprimanded by a woman. The woman shoots her away, saying this library was not a place for black people. After leaving on the bus, she took out a book that was secretly taken from the library. She advised her children that when they grow up, they must be smart if they want to be respected. One night, Dorothy threw a party at her house, where Catherine met Jim. At that time, Jim tried to apologize for his words at the first meeting did hurt her feelings. He then invites Catherine to a romantic dance to make amends. Jim's sincerity made her melt, but in the middle of the dance, radio news caught her attention which reported that Russia had successfully launched a rocket and managed to explore the planet one full circle. For a moment, the atmosphere became silent. Early in the morning, at the office, Harrison announced that from this moment on, everyone would have to work overtime until the rocket they built could fly into space successfully. However, days later, even though everyone worked overtime continuously, rocket tests still fail. The next day, NASA bought a sophisticated machine to automatically calculate the coordinates of a point formula. Still, unfortunately, there was not a single NASA employee who could operate it. At night, when nobody knew there was a new calculating machine, Dorothy sneaked into the engine room and studied how the machine worked all night. The next day she explained with this new engine that the jobs of black accountants could be in jeopardy of being replaced. Meanwhile, Mary went to the court to apply for admission to one of the white men's universities. After getting the trial schedule, she rushed back to the office and told her boss that she didn't want to give up and would try her best to get into a white man's university to become a rocket engineer. A few days later, Harrison wondered why Catherine often left during work hours even though it was not time to rest. Looking at Catherine's drenched condition, he was very angry and wondered why she had to leave work every day for 40 minutes. With teary eyes, Essie let out the anger she had held back for so long. She spent 40 minutes per day just for the sake of the toilet. Black people were not even allowed to ride bicycles, so every day, she had to go to the old division building for 800 meters in high heels because, in this building, there were no toilets for black people. Harrison must have never known that there was a black coffee pot here. Despite how smart or good she is, work people will still be disgusted at her black skin. Hearing the outpouring of the heart, the room was filled with silence. After being satisfied venting her heart, Essie then asked permission to go to the toilet. The next day, there was a commotion in the NASA building over the incident that Harrison smashed all the black signage posted all over the restrooms in NASA buildings. Before leaving, he said that at NASA, all of our urine has the same color, so from now, there will be no more white or black toilets. Months later, the trial ended, and on May 5, 1961, it was time for the United States' first official rocket launch. Manual rockets successfully flew into space. Americans celebrated the success, and the ranks of the creators of the NASA rocket then received an award from President John F. Kennedy. Not satisfied until there, in his speech, President Kennedy said that America would continue to explore space to win the competition against Russia. Day by day, Catherine and Jim's relationship became closer. Meanwhile, in court, Mary tried to convince the judge that she applied for admission to a white man's university to become the first female engineer at NASA. Maybe, now Mary had not accomplished anything. Still, she was sure in the next few years, her name would be immortalized as one of the greatest women in the world, and that's when the judge's name would also be recorded as the first judge to give black people the opportunity to study at white people's universities. Her way of negotiating impressed the judge, thereby facilitating the verdict in her favor. In the office, Catherine asked for permission to work on the calculation formula for the project's next rocket launch. Although Paul was against her, Harrison decided to trust Catherine, judging from the results of previous work. After 47 days in space, the astronaut who flew the NASA rocket back to Earth met an untimely death due to the missed landing of the rocket, which was thus destroyed and sank into the sea. The government officials were again disappointed. As a result of the damage, the rocket that was collected from the public's tax money sank to the bottom of the sea. They demanded Harrison perfect the manufacture of the next rocket. At noon, Catherine gave Paul the calculated data, but he refused to say that the data had been changed this morning, so she had to recalculate using the new data. In her heart, she could only be patient, and she gently asked him to let her join the meeting so she could always be up to date with the latest data. Unfortunately, he still told her to count the existing data and not to oppose it. The next day, Catherine's count was again rejected by Paul, the same as the day before. Soon after that, Harrison came, and she was desperate to ask her boss for permission directly so she could attend the meeting. After constantly begging, he eventually allowed her into the meeting room. Astronauts and government officials have gathered. Harrison reported that currently, the research team is still in the stage of calculating the coordinates for the launch and landing of the rocket. However, the government envoy was not satisfied with the report. They wanted clearer numbers. For being at a loss for words, he had to have Catherine do the impromptu counts in person in front of everyone. She calculated the exact miles per hour. The coordinates would be 0.060 degrees west square miles, she said. Everyone was so awestruck by her skills because it was such a difficult formula that so far could not be solved. He managed to finish it in just a matter of minutes casually. Harrison said that the data would be finished in a few days. On the other hand, after studying for a long time how NASA's automatic calculating machine works that day, Dorothy was secretly trying to operate the machine. When the engine started running, 2 officers suddenly came to the office and were confused about how the engine was working as none of the employees could operate it. The next day, Michelle saw Dorothy and reported that her boss wanted Dorothy to operate the NASA calculator and fire all the other black accountants. It turned out that yesterday's officer reported to her superiors, and she answered that she would accept the position only if all the other black accountants were allowed to work there with her. Michelle couldn't help but agree. The sight of Mary's first day of college confused lecturers about why there were black women in the class. Then she explained that she was legally enrolled on this campus because it has a license. Everyone in the class can't do anything, alone among the white men. When Catherine comes home from work, she is shocked to see the people in the house neatly dressed. They have also prepared a special dinner for her. Just as she was processing everything, Jim came out and knelt and proposed to the idol of his heart. There was nothing she could do but cry with joy and say she was ready, but life is a mingled yarn of happy and sad events. The next day Harrison informed her that shortly, NASA's automatic calculator would be operational, so, from now on, the Space Research Division would not require Catherine's math skills anymore. She had no options but to return to her old division and join the other black accountants. She could only resign herself to the decision. Before leaving, Harrison's secretary gave her a pearl necklace that all the Research Division employees had jointly made as a keepsake. A few days later, after returning to the old division, Catherine's wedding party was held on February 20th, 1962. America's second rocket launch began and was broadcast on all TV and radio stations. This time the American mission is not just flying into space but also roaming around orbit just as Russia did. In the operator's room, Harrison asked Paul why are today's machine count data different from yesterday's machine count data, but he had no answer. So, he contacted the astronauts to tell them about this data discrepancy. As soon as they heard the news, the astronaut asked him to call Catherine immediately. The astronaut believed in the black woman because he had seen firsthand how Catherine calculated. If, after recalculation later, she said the coordinates were accurate, he will continue the mission, but if wrong, the mission will be aborted. He then ordered one of his staff to hurry and find Catherine. While running towards the division building, the accountant, Catherine's former co-worker, finally felt the exhaustion of running the 800 meters that Catherine used to feel every day just to go to the toilet. At the same time, astronauts are also on their way to the rocket when it arrives. Harrison's staff immediately handed over the coordinates and pleaded with Catherine to calculate everything as quickly as possible against the clock finished counting. She immediately ran to the operator's station. When she wanted to leave, Harrison suddenly came out and told her to come in for the first time in her life. She could feel how the situation in the NASA operator room was. Harrison then reported to the astronauts that the results of the calculation of the coordinates matched, and astronauts could continue their mission here at Cape Canaveral. These pictures are from Cape Canaveral as the rocket successfully launched into space. Everything looked good in the black clerk's building. When Dorothy was about to go home, Michelle came to give her an official appointment letter as head of the calculating machine division because now their position was equal, and she no longer remained Michelle's subordinate. As a sign of respect, Michelle calls Dorothy by her first name Mrs. Vaughn. Hours passed, and the mission of exploring the orbit was successful. The warning light indicated that the rocket must immediately descend. This condition was also reported on TV and radio. Still, on landing, suddenly the heat barrier layer of the Earth's atmosphere experienced problems. Friendship 7, do you copy? Over. Friendship 7, do you copy? Over. Astronauts managed to land safely on Earth. The rocket remained intact with no major damage, and the landing was exactly at the coordinates that Catherine had calculated. Hearing the happy news, all Americans cheered while others celebrated their success. Harrison walked over to Catherine to say a good job before leaving while he jokingly asked, "Can we fly to the moon?" She confidently answered, "We're all ready."